Okay, welcome everyone to what is the annual lecture for the Center for the Public Understanding of Greek and Roman Drama. I'm glad to be here. I also apologize for being a bit absent. It's a bit of a rough year as for everyone else, but it's a pleasure to be here today, even if far away, and I hope to be able to see all of you, at least most of you, when I come back over the summer. But today I'm not here really to talk about myself, but I'm here to, first of all, to introduce our distinguished speaker for today, with Tim Moore from the Washington University in St. Louis. And we were chatting before together with Tim, and I was highlighting that one of the key features of our center is the fact that there is both a G and an R in the title. So there is both Greek and Roman drama. And today we are focusing indeed both on Greek and Roman theater. So I'm very glad that Tim chose this particular topic to show this interaction, this relationship between the two forms of theater. But Tim Moore, first of all, is one of the world leading experts of Roman theater, Roman comedy in particular. I was saying to him, I got really truly inspired by his work when I started to work on Roman comedy more than 10 years ago. I've never met him personally, but he's a bit like my mentor, my master, my guide, my Virgil for Dante. Tim has truly revolutionized the study of Roman theater, and I will give you a 2-minute lecture, try to explain why I did that, okay? Because it truly, everyone likes saying that their own work is groundbreaking, but I think this lab can truly be used and applied to Tim's work. Tim essentially has approached Roman comedy in a way which has not been done, again, not done in such a systematic way, I would say, since the 2nd century BC. In a sense, Tim Moore has brought back something that has been forgotten for almost 2,000 years, which of course is very obvious, but actually it has been not obvious at all for many centuries. And this is the fact that Roman comedies, the text of Roman comedies are not really texts, but they are some sort of scripts that were originally performed. Again, this was of course obvious to Terence, and of course obvious to people who read Terence in the 2nd century BC, but that was not obvious at all, for instance, to the German philologists in the 19th century. And that was not obvious at all for people who taught secondary school students in Italy back in the 90s in Italy, as I was. Tim Moore's work has essentially approached Roman comedy as a performance. Roman comedy is a performative text. And this means a lot of different things. This approach has a lot of different implications. And I will briefly say one important implication, which is really at the core of Tim's work, which relates with meter. Everybody nowadays does not like meter very much. They think the meter is something a bit, I don't know, mysterious, something which is only interesting for crazy German philologists or a bit nerdy scholars who are interested in these sort of things. But actually, Tim Moore has shown that meter is a very important aspect, not just of the text of Roman comedies, but of the performance of Roman comedies. The, I would say, assumption at the core of Tim Moore's work is that there is a very important and meaningful relationship between meter and the content of the play, the development of the plot, the emotions of the actors, and so forth. The meter of Roman comedy is a truly essential element to understand what's going on in the play. And I do believe, and I'm happy to say that before Tim Moore, no one truly put this very important element at the center of the research. Tim Moore has published extensively Roman comedy. I do think that his most influential work is indeed the one of meter, and it's called more precisely the music of Roman comedy, because meter, as Tim Moore clearly shows in this, was a support for music. There is no Roman music left, so we cannot really understand how was the music, exactly how was the music of Roman comedy. But to understand how the meter of Roman comedy worked, in a way, helps us to reconstruct how the music of Roman comedy helped the development of the play. So I will stop here. My short lecture on comic meter will end here. But let me say that truly, it's impossible to read Roman comedy again in the same way as we used to do before Tim Moore's work. It would be a shame. It would be unforgivable to do so. And so I strongly recommend to read Tim Moss' research. I mean, I just mentioned one book, but Tim Moss has authored a lot, many different articles, and I would say that each of his individual pieces played an important role in advancing our understanding of Roman comedy or Roman theater in general. Today's talk about meter. In fact, is going to talk about Anapest in Greek and Roman theater, but as you're going to hear very soon, please forgive everything you think about meter. The kind of meter that Tim Moss is interested in is not the meter you think. It's a completely different thing. And that's really the true way to approach the study of Roman meter. So I'm very excited to give the floor to Tim, and I'm very excited looking forward to hearing what he has to say on that. And I say to everyone, open your mind, open your ears, because they're going to be changed after today's lecture. So thank you very much, Tim. Thanks a lot. And I will see you in 45 minutes for the Q&A, which I'm sure is going to be very interesting as well. Thank you very much, Tim, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pepe, for that very generous introduction. And thank you to you and to Tom and to Owen and Mary for the organization of today's event. And thanks to all of you for coming out on what I understand is your last day of the semester. Warmest congratulations. This is a hard semester for all of us, and you've made it through. Well done. I'm glad to celebrate with you. As I began preparing this talk on Anapests, I remembered with some trepidation the words of Peter Smith, one of my mentors at the University of North Carolina nearly 40 years ago. Starting our session on the intricacies of the Homeric hexameter, Smith commented, "For most classics graduate students, meter is like German. It's one of those things they have to do." The challenge in making meter more than a necessary evil might seem especially great in the case of the Anapest. Anapests, after all, lack the overwhelming importance of the dactylic hexameter or the iambic trimeter, nor do they have the exciting unpredictability of Dalkmiacs, the charm of Iolix, or the exoticism of Ionics. Still, just as Peter Smith showed me that aspects of Homeric meter, such as epic corruption and enjambment, are both essential for an understanding of the Iliad and fascinating in themselves, I hope today to persuade you not only that we can gain a much greater appreciation of ancient drama by understanding how the playwrights used anapests, but also that anapests can be a whole lot of fun. After laying out some methodological assumptions, I will consider the unique characteristics of the Anapest and assess what Anapests tend to do in Greek and Roman theater. Finally, I will offer some glimpses into the history of the Anapest on the Greco-Roman stage. First, then, some basic assumptions. I begin by assuming a close association between metrical text and musical performance on the ancient stage. To a great degree, meter determined the presence or absence of musical accompaniment and the performer's mode of utterance. There was a very strong, though not universal, tendency in both Greek and Roman theater for iambic trimeters to be spoken without accompaniment and for lyric meters to be sung to the accompaniment of the aulos or tibia. Anapests, as we will see, fall in between these two categories of iambic trimeters and lyrics. The second important connection between meter and musical performance lies in the rhythm of accompanied meters. We need not and should not assume absolute correspondence between the rhythms offered by Greek and Latin's quantitative meters and what was heard on stage. Nevertheless, it is clear that the distinction between long and short syllables was the foundation of musical rhythm in sung verse. This close connection between written meter and sung rhythm is especially important in the case of the Anapest, where metrical patterns bring it a rhythm conspicuously distinct from most other meters. My next assumption is that these same patterns of long and short syllables, as they help us determine musical rhythm, also bring to each meter a distinct set of characteristics, which played an important role in how the meters were used and how they affected audiences. Thus, while we should not assume that any meter always produced the same effects whenever it was used, features of the meters brought strong tendencies and associations. These tendencies and associations will prove especially important in the case of the Anapest. My third assumption is that meters would make an impression, which audience would remember. We have good evidence that both Greece and Rome had ancient audiences that were acute listeners, who heard and appreciated the details of musical performance. Meters and rhythms, therefore, would have a memorable impact, especially when meters were used in a way audience members would find unusual or surprising. This awareness of metrical musical memory brings two important corollaries. First, it means that musical repetition within a play can be of considerable significance, acting like the reprise in a modern musical or the leitmotif in opera to reinforce themes, contribute to characterization, and underline features of the plot. Second, it means that experienced audience members would carry with them a set of expectations based on earlier uses of meters, which playwrights could fulfill or violate for various effects. A final assumption I will make is that for all the differences between Greek and Latin metrical practice, there are nonetheless essential continuities between the Greek and Roman theater in how meters worked on stage. Students of Greek and Roman theatrical meters have tended to live in different worlds. And one of my aims in this paper, and in much of my current work, is to draw attention to how much we might learn by considering them together. Let us turn then to Anapests. As I suspect most of you know, the Anapest has as its core a pattern of two syllables followed by a long syllable. With various restrictions, I can replace the long syllable with two shorts and vice versa, producing dactyls, spondees, and occasionally four short-syllable prokelizmatics. These feet of Anapests, or the equivalent, almost always work in pairs, so that outside of Plautus, metricians generally consider the metron the basic repeated unit. For examples, here are the first verses of our earliest extant play, Aeschylus's Persians, and what is probably the latest extant ancient drama written in verse, the Octavia, attributed to Seneca. Here and in what follows, I will try to capture at least some sense of the rhythm of Greek and Latin verse by singing the meters with made-up melodies. Tadamen person tonoi komenon, yam wagakailo si dera full gains. Let's ponder what this basic construction means. It means if we assume that each long syllable lasts twice as long as each short syllable, that each anapestic foot, when sung or chanted, would be equivalent to one of our 2/4 measures, with short syllables equivalent to a quaver or eighth note, and each long syllable equivalent to a crotchet or quarter note. Such a pattern seems mundane to us, accustomed as we are to regular and consistent musical rhythms. But we should note how distinctive it is within Greco-Roman meters. Anapests are the only Greek or Roman meter, aside from dactylics, which are relatively rare in drama, in which, assuming a ratio of short to long syllables of 1:2, basic rhythmic units are always the same length, and they're always evenly divisible into halves, except in the case of catalexis. To make this distinction clear, let's compare a couple of other meters. First, some Trochaic Dimeters from Aristophanes' Birds. Enthakai pe sandros te deomenos psuke nidein e. Note that if we take the short syllable as the core time unit, the basic metrical unit here, the Trochaic metron, varies from 6 time units when the final unkept syllable of the metron is short, to 7 when that syllable is long. And only in the case of a short unkept syllable is that basic metrical unit easily divisible by 2. Or note these critiques from Terence's Andria. Id nest verum midest genus hominum pessimum de negando modo quis pudor paula dest. The basic rhythmic unit, the cretic foot, is usually 5 time units, not divisible by 2, as in pessumin. But when Terence replaces the central short syllable with a long syllable or 2 shorts, as in id nest way or genus hominum, the 5 time unit foot becomes 6 time units. Many scholars, recently and notably Stefan Hagel, have argued for frequent regularization of these erratic rhythmic units in sung and especially danced verse. It is certain that sometimes such regularization occurred, but I doubt that it was anywhere universal. And when it occurred, it would have been something conspicuously imposed upon the metrical rhythm, in contrast to Anapest, where a steady rhythm comes naturally. Anapests thus offer a rhythmic consistency that is almost unique among Greek and Roman dramatic meters. That consistency, I would argue, lies at the heart of their use throughout Greek and Roman drama, for it reinforces a sense of steady forward motion, hence their first and most conspicuous use in drama as an accompaniment to entrances, especially the entrance of choruses, as in the opening of Persai, I cited above. The association of Anapest with steady forward motion has long been recognized, as is evident in the common name for Anapests like those that open Persai, marching Anapests. I would like to argue today that the association of Anapest with physical motion leads to a further connection of Anapests with motion in a more metaphorical sense, so that throughout ancient theater, we find Anapest playing important structural roles, marking movement in the plot. As a structural device, Anapests show up most often providing closure. So many plays, especially Greek tragedies, end with a short anapestic tag by the chorus, that particular use of Anapest seems to be of limited thematic significance, an indicator of the chorus's physical motion in leaving the orchestra. But when the final Anapests are expanded beyond the choral tag, and when Anapests occur at significant moments elsewhere in the play, they gain more importance, often marking key moments in the plot, and sometimes, when an anapestic passage later in the play echoes an earlier one, marking the fulfillment of plans or projects set in motion in the earlier Anapests. This use of Anapests to mark movement of the plot ties in with another way in which a metaphorical sense of motion helps to determine the use and effect of Anapests. Jacqueline d'Angèle observed that the Anapests of Senecan tragedy consistently serve as indicators of fate and inevitability, as the steady forward motion of the Anapests reinforces the sense that characters are moving or being moved towards their destinies. This association of Anapest with fate and inevitability, I would argue, plays an important role throughout the history of the theatrical Anapest, including in the Anapests above that open Octavia. As Octavia laments her fate, the Anapests help to send the message that she is in for much worse. A paradoxical feature of Anapests is that within their steady consistency, they allow an unusual amount of variation. While every metrical position is 2 time units, 1 long syllable or 2 shorts, the ability to interchange these leads to anapestic verses of great variety. Verses can be almost completely anapestic, like this one from Sophocles' Oedipus Tyrannus, prosobe mania tisobe desas, or they can approach being dactylic, like this one from Aeschylus's Agamemnon. Jdeus poluan noros ampigunaikos. Long syllables can multiply, producing series of spondies, as in this verse from Euripides' Ion. Marpso dal toxusos de nos. More rarely, the double shorts dominate, as in these verses from Plautus's Trinumus. This rhythmic variety combines with a similar flexibility in performance mode. As was noticed above, while iambic trimeters were almost always spoken without accompaniment, and lyrics almost always sung to the aulos or tibia, Anapests were sometimes spoken, sometimes sung, and sometimes chanted, with or without accompaniment. Students of Greek meter have identified various features to distinguish between what are generally called recitative anapests, which were more likely to have been spoken or chanted, and lyric anapests, which were usually sung. Doricisms, greater numbers of spondies and prokellismatic, more frequent catalexis, more unpredictable caesuri, and the intermingling of Anapest with other meters. In Roman drama, scholars have proposed probable differences in performance mode based on such features as caesuri and what Sandra Boldrini called andamento, or the degree to which verses feel anapestic or dactylic. These categories are of great value, but it should be noted that they are only predictive, not determinative. The borders between Greek recitative and lyric anapests is always fluid, and sometimes characters refer explicitly to the singing of verses that have no features usually associated with lyric anapests. On the Roman side, any connection between performance mode and specific metrical features of anapests is even more uncertain. I would like to propose that in the case of both recitative and lyric anapest, performers could choose modes of performance, ranging from the most matter-of-fact recitation to elaborate arias. Indeed, the steadiness of the metrical rhythm could encourage either bare recitation or elaborate singing, as the relative simplicity of the rhythm made melodic complexity easier. The openness of anapests, both to limit hints of foreboding and to musical bravura, explains another common use of anapests in ancient drama, lament. Euripidean heroines and sometimes heroes use anapests, both recitative and lyric, in some of their most wrenching passages of lamentation. The tragic playwrights of Rome continued this tradition. We have fragments of mournful anapestic songs by Ennius, Pacuvius, Accius, and Ovid, which ultimately led through Seneca to the anapestic lament of Octavia, cited above. The musical flexibility and in-betweenness of anapests contributes to another important function of the meter, as a meter of contrast, both with iambic trimeters and with lyrics. In the opening of Octavia, for example, Octavia's nurse responds in iambic trimeters to Octavia's anapests, in a pattern found throughout ancient drama. The contrast of meter sets the more emotional, and in this case, as often, the socially superior character in opposition to the more practical and lower class nurse. At the same time, however, anapests can serve the opposite function, providing a contrast to lyrics, as when, for example, during the long komos of Aeschylus's Koiphoroi, the chorus repeatedly interjects with anapests, while Electra and Orestes sing iolics. That same in-betweenness leads to another significant function of anapests, as a transition between iambic trimeters and lyric meters, or vice versa. Aeschylus's chorus of Persian elders in Persai, for example, moves from their anapests into ionics after 64 verses, then back to anapests before the entrance of Atossa brings iambic trimeters. With these characteristics, typical uses, and tendencies of anapests in mind, I would like now to examine some moments in the history of the Anapest between the opening verses of Persei and the opening of Octavia. In the interest of time, I'm going to set aside for now a discussion of Old Comedy, where the role of Anapest within the ritual pattern of Parodos, Agon, Parabasis, and Syzygies deserves its own special treatment beyond the scope of my talk today. Aeschylus, in his remaining extant plays, continues and expands the use of Anapests we have seen already in Persei. Agamemnon offers a good case study. Like the elders of Persei, the Argive elders who make up the chorus of Agamemnon enter with Anapests, and they perform 64 Anapestic verses before they switch to lyrics. Unlike in Persei, however, no Anapests bridge the transition away from lyrics at the end of the Parodos. The next set of Anapests, therefore, occurs as the chorus starts the first stasimon, saluting the punishment of Paris with a prayer to Zeus and Night. The Anapests underline well the inevitable punishment that these verses describe. That association of Anapest with punishment brings extra frisson as Anapests next appear, when, after the lyrics of the third stasimon, the elders greet the returning Agamemnon. The foreboding that comes with the Anapests reaches its peak after Agamemnon and then Cassandra have entered the palace, and the chorus expresses their fear in more Anapests. As Sylvia Brown and others have pointed out, there is every expectation that these Anapests, like those of the Parodos and the first stasimon, will lead to choral lyrics. Instead, they are interrupted by Agamemnon's death cries from within. The fate that struck Paris in the Anapests of the first stasimon, feared both here and in the third stasimon, has come to fulfillment. When Anapests next occur, they respond both to the continuing theme of punishment and also to a heightening of emotion. Standing over the bodies of her husband and Cassandra, Clytemnestra explains her actions in iambic trimeters, which she continues unfazed after the chorus responds with excited dochmiacs. After the chorus curses Helen, however, Clytemnestra rebukes them in Anapests. The mention of her sister has riled Clytemnestra. She loses a little of her calm, and with it, her iambic trimeters. At the same time, the Anapests return with the mention of the woman whose abduction set into motion the disastrous events of the play. Though stirred, Clytemnestra still stays calmer than the chorus, who respond to her rebuke by wondering in more dochmiacs what curse has brought her upon the house. Clytemnestra agrees that there is a curse on the house, again in Anapests. She will continue her Anapest in further exchanges with the chorus as she gives her perspective on how Agamemnon's death is a just and God-sent punishment, blaming the play's events first on the crimes of Atreus, then on the slaughter of Iphigenia. Meanwhile, in 3 parallel Ephimnia, the chorus interrupt their own lyrics as they mourn for Agamemnon in Anapests, juxtaposing with Clytemnestra's explanation their own very different perspectives on what has happened. Finally, in the play's final Anapests, Clytemnestra hopes for an end to the house's troubles. Ending the Anapests, Clytemnestra hopes that her view of punishment will prevail, but the continuing presence of Anapests, which have foreboded trouble throughout the play, helps to underline how wrong she is. Sophocles stepped back some from Anapests. He has his chorus sent to Anapests only in Ajax, but he concentrated instead on using Anapests to mark significant entrances of characters. Usually, he saves these entrance-marking Anapests for just 1 or 2 entrances. The entrance of the blinded Oedipus, late in Oedipus Tyrannus, for example. In Antigone, however, Sophocles multiplies the entrance Anapest. As the course of Theban elders celebrate their city's victory over Polynices and the Seven, in the first strophe of the Parodos. They replace their Aeolics with Anapests as they announce the defeat of Polynices. Anapests interrupt the Parodos's Aeolics 3 more times, when the elders sing of Zeus's hatred for boasting, when they describe the deaths of Eteocles and Polynices, and when, at the end of the Parodos, they announce the entrance of Creon. The chorus then use Anapests to announce an entrance of each member of the royal family, except Eurydice, Antigone, Ismene, Haemon, and then Antigone again. After this last entrance, the chorus continue delivering Anapests in response to lyrics from Antigone, as they try to console her with talk of glory and remind her of her mortality. Later in the same scene, in the longest series of Anapests so far, the pattern of Anapestic entrances is reversed. Creon, Antigone, and the chorus deliver Anapests as Antigone is led off to her tomb. The final Anapestic entrance announcement occurs when Creon returns to the stage for the last time, bringing the body of Haemon, and the chorus blames Creon for what has happened. They turn back to divine punishment in the choral tag. The Anapests of the Parodos, which begin with Polynices, introduce divine vengeance and end with Creon, who is responsible for much of what will happen. Combined with the repeated Anapestic entrances, the Anapests surrounding the punishment of Antigone, and the choral tag to underline rhythmically the net of doom binding each of these characters and Creon's responsibility, along with Polynices, for that net. This association between Anapests and doom was clearly one of the forces that most inspired Euripides in his innovative use of the Anapests. His first great experiment with the meter comes in what is probably his earliest extant play, Alcestis. Apollo begins Alcestis with a monologue in iambic trimeters. He soon sees Death, who is arriving to carry off Alcestis. Indignant at the gods present, Death delivers Anapests. Tisu pros melatrois tisu te depoles, poi vadike saltima seneron, aporis dominos kai katapaon. In this play, then, an actor, rather than the chorus, makes the play's first move from iambic trimeters to another, more musical meter. This practice would become common as Euripides' career progressed. Actors, rather than the chorus, perform an Anapest or other meters besides iambic trimeters in 12 of the 19 extant plays attributed to Euripides, as does Sophocles' Electra. However, unless Prometheus Bound predates Alcestis, this is the first time in extant tragedy in which any meter other than iambic trimeter occurs before the Parodos. The Anapestic outburst would have been striking and memorable. Death is unable to maintain the metrical change he brings to Alcestis. After just 10 verses, Apollo responds, speaking iambic trimeters. Anapests, however, keep returning throughout much of the play. First, in an unusual dialogue between semi-choruses at the opening of the Parodos. Then in the chorus's conclusion that marriage brings more pain than joy. Then in Admetus's hypocritical plea with his wife not to die. In the chorus's final farewell to Alcestis, and finally in a series of long laments by Admetus as he returns from burying his wife. With the striking Anapestic entrance of Death still in their minds, the audience would be reminded by the recurring Anapests of how Death is master in this play, in spite of Apollo's interventions. Meanwhile, however, Heracles has gone to the tomb and rescued Alcestis from death. The Anapests vanish, except for a brief generic choral tag at play's end, which may be a later interpolation. Euripides stretches his use of foreboding Anapests still further in Medea. In the Prologos, the nurse's iambic trimeters are interrupted by a cry from Medea off stage, performing Anapests. After Medea's outburst, the nurse resumes, but now she performs Anapests as well. O dista nosago melea te ponon, o moi pos anoloiman. Todake no peloi pai des meter kine gradian kine decolon. The Anapests continue through more words from the nurse, another outburst from Medea, and the first words of the chorus, who begin the parodos entering in response to Medea's cries. Distributions of Doricisms suggest that Medea and the chorus sing lyric Anapests, while the nurse speaks or chants recitative Anapests. This would be an especially striking aural moment. Not only does Medea perform Anapest before the chorus does, but she does so from off stage with lyric Anapests. And her Anapests, unlike those of Death and Alcestis, remain, changing the nurse's mode of delivery and setting the stage for the Anapest with which the chorus enters. This metrical rhythmic continuity, I would argue, reflects both Medea's close alliance with these other female characters and the power she has over them. Neither that bond nor that power is complete, however. The parodos consists of 4 separate choral sections separated by anapestic passages of various length, performed by Medea and the nurse. In the 4 sections, the chorus moves progressively further away from Medea's opening anapests. In the first section, they append to their anapests a long string of dactyls, ending in one iolic verse. Responding strophe and antistrophe follow, each preceded by more anapests from Medea and the nurse. In each, the chorus first continues the anapests, but switches to iolics after just 3 verses. In the epode that ends the parodos, the chorus abandons anapests altogether. The parodos thus reflects metrically the relationship of the chorus and Medea that will develop as the play progresses. The continuing anapests suggest the alliance of sympathies between Medea and the chorus, and the subjection of the chorus to Medea's strong will. But from the beginning, Medea and the chorus have a basic difference in views, and the chorus makes futile attempts to influence Medea. These differences and attempts at influence come to the fore in the non-anapestic passages. Anapests later in the play reflect the same power Medea showed in the prologue and parodos. After her first scene of dialogue, in which Medea obtains a day's delay in her exile from Creon, we might expect either a brief response in iambic trimeters or a stasimon. Instead, the chorus performs anapests, lamenting Medea's forthcoming exile in a passage with verbal echoes of the opening verses Medea sang from off stage earlier. Pel melea ton sonake on diste neginai, poi potetrepse teneproxenian, e domine tonasote rakakon, hosse saporanse clidonate os me de akakon eparosen. Though the chorus assumes despair, Medea promptly corrects them, explaining to them and the audience that the one-day reprieve she has gained from Creon will give her what she needs to exact her revenge. The chorus's echo of both Medea's initial meter and her opening words hints at Medea's control of the situation, even before she reveals that control explicitly. The pattern is repeated later in the play, after Medea has gotten an oath from Aegis that he will give her asylum if she reaches Athens. The exit of Aegis, like the earlier exit of Creon, brings not a response in iambic trimeters or a lyric stasimon, but again a brief anapestic response from the chorus, in which they praise Aegis and wish him well. Just as they were wrong to despair in their anapests after the Creon scene, the chorus is wrong to rejoice here. For as Medea reveals in the ensuing monologue, the promise of asylum will allow her to kill not only Creon's daughter, but also her own children. Once again, the chorus's rhythm, echoing Medea's opening Anapest, has hinted at Medea's power to determine events, even as their words suggest otherwise. The next Anapests appear much later, after the Paidagogos has reported that Creon's daughter has received the poisoned crown and robe, and Medea has delivered the famous monologue in which she determines that she cannot stop herself from killing her children. The last barrier to her vengeance, her own motherly instinct, has now been overcome. The chorus responds with the longest series of anapestic verses since the opening scene. Once again, the chorus does not quite seem to get the significance of what has happened, this time perhaps through a refusal to acknowledge the terrifying truth. They claim that they have a mastery of subtle stories superior to that which is normal in women. Yet in what they profess as their moment of great insight, the chorus ends up repeating the rather banal claim that it is better not to have children. Once again, they have missed the point. For Medea's problem, of course, is not that she has children, but that she is about to kill them. Yet, even as what they sing or speak seems to ignore Medea's plans, their rhythm reflects Medea's power as they return to the Anapests she initiated. The final Anapests bring a chilling finale. When Jason has learned of the children's murder, and Medea has refused to let him have their bodies and has prophesied his own inglorious death, the plot is for all intents and purposes over. But Euripides ends the play not there, but with one more metrical indication of Medea's power. Jason curses Medea in Anapests, which will continue through the end of the play. Medea's despair, expressed in Anapest, began the play's first musical moment, as Jason, in his despair, introduces the play's last Anapest. Euripides provides a powerful metrical reminder of how effectively Medea has turned the tables. In his early Alcestis and Medea, then, Euripides used Anapest's association with lamentation and with doom to produce powerful thematic effects. He would continue to develop this thematic use of Anapest through much of his career, most dramatically in his two plays centered on Hecate. The earlier of these, Hecate, raises anapestic lamentation to a new level. After the play's opening monologue in Iambic Trimeters by the ghost of Polydorus, Hecate, the chorus, and Polyxena deliver over 150 consecutive anapestic verses, interrupted only by a few dactylics and dochmiacs. These anapests both express the women's laments and also drive forward inexorably toward the entrance of Odysseus to take Polyxena away to be sacrificed, which occurs right after the Anapest ends. In Hecate, the Anapests stop at this point, except for a few verses in a later monody by Polymestor and the choral tag. In Troades, a similar long series of Anapests leads to echoes later in the play. Here again, Hecate begins Anapest in the prologue, and the chorus picks them up in the parodos. Again, the Anapests end with the entrance of a Greek, bringing bad news. This time, it is Talthybius, coming to announce to which Greek leader each of the Trojan women has been allotted. In this play, the Anapests not only lead to this moment of doom, but they recur as the play continues, marking further steps in Troy's disaster. The entrance of Andromache and Astyanax on their way to slavery, the re-entrance of Talthybius, this time to fetch Astyanax for slaughter, the return of Astyanax's body, and finally, the moment the women see the Troy is burning. Ion offers an intriguing variation on these thematic anapests. After Hermes' opening monologue, Ion enters celebrating his service to Apollo in Anapests. Anapests continue through his monody and as he interrupts the chorus in the parodos. These Anapests, remarkable not only for their number, but also for their stunningly long chains of consecutive long syllables, are not a lament, but rather a celebration by Ion of his role in serving Apollo. The next long series of anapestic verses is a lament, and it echoes Ion's Anapest conspicuously. Creusa, believing that Xuthus will bring a bastard child into her home, angrily chastises Apollo for his rape of her. She also sings lyric anapests astonishingly full of long syllables. The rhythmic echo joins mother and son even before the two are aware of their relationship. More sinisterly, the severe rebuke of Apollo expressed in verses echoing Ion completely undermine the feeling of pious reverence instilled by the song of Apollo's acolyte. The aural reinforcement of Apollo's guilt continues later, when the chorus exclaim that there is no escape after it has been discovered that Creusa tried to have Ion killed. In his last plays, Euripides appears to have largely left behind the Anapest as a thematic tool, turning to other meters. Helen has no Anapest, except for its choral tag, perhaps apocryphal. Orestes and Phoenici have just a few, and Bacchae's first Anapest begin only at its characters' final exits. The parts of Iphigenia at Aulis that are probably post-Euripidean, however, as well as the almost certainly non-Euripidean Rhesus, include extensive use of anapests, sometimes for scenes such as matter-of-fact dialogue that are rare or non-existent in 5th century tragedy. Post-classical Greek tragedy, I suspect, gained a special fondness for the Anapest. It is no surprise, therefore, that when Plautus adapted Greek meters for his comedies, he turned with enthusiasm to the Anapest. Plautus's affection for anapestic verse is clear. They make up nearly 4% of his extant plays, almost twice as much as any other non-iambo-trochaic meter. And the degree to which brevis brevians and other types of prosodic license occur in anapestic passages indicates how far Plautus was willing, to put it bluntly, to abuse the Latin language in order to produce anapests. In some plays, he makes very good use of the structural anapest. In Pseudolus, for example, anapestic octonarii and other anapests mark most major new movements in the plot: the entrance of the villain Ballio, the re-entrance of Pseudolus with a plan to deceive Ballio, the entrance of Harpax, which causes Pseudolus to develop a whole brand new plan, the entrance of Simia, who will put the plan into place, the re-entrance of Harpax, who will reveal that Ballio and Pseudolus's master Simo have been duped, and Sumulus's demand for money from his tricked master. Elsewhere, Plautus follows the lead of Old Comedy and of post-classical tragedy in using anapest for more mundane scenes, like a long scene of deception in Miles Gloriosus. Plautus's most delightful anapests, however, are several long songs in which a character singing anapests, sometimes only anapests, sometimes anapests in combination with other meters, express their strongest emotions. Plautus's willingness to stretch the rules of prosody, his skillful use of catalexis and its lack, changes from anapests to spondees to prokelosmatics to dactyls, practically unheard of in Greek dramatic anapests, and other features such as anaphora and alliteration open these anapests up to an expressiveness that brings both great excitement and hilarious paratragedy. I offer here one of those anapestic songs, the lament of the love-struck lover Alcesimarchus in Kistellaria. Alcesimarchus begins with 3 anapestic septenarii, each clearly marked as distinct through catalexis. But his lists of love torments leads him into an anapestic system in which the form-bringing catalexis is delayed. Twice more, Alcesimarchus introduces an anapestic septenarii, but each time his emotion gets the better of him and he falls back into anapestic systems. Most of the song contains an unusually large number of short syllables, which underline Alcesimarchus' hysteria. Dwelling on what love is doing to him, however, Alcesimarchus falls into such gloom that he sings one stretch of 25 long syllables, interrupted by only 4 short syllables. All these rhythmic fireworks lead to the ridiculous moose of the reason Alcesimarchus is so upset. He's been away from his girlfriend for 6 days. Here's the whole song. Credeg amorem prima per homines cadificinem commentum, hanc ego de me conjecturam domifacioni foresquaeram, quomnes homines super antideo cruciabilitatimus animi, iactor agator stimulor versor in amoris rota miserex animor, ferro distraherdi ripior ita nubilam mentanim habeo, ubi subinum sed est animus ita omnia sunt ingenia, quod lubit non lubitit continuo, ita mamoras animi ludificat, fugat acatat petit raptat retinat lactat largitor, quod dat non dat deludit, modo quod suasit id dissuadit, quod dissuasit id ostentat. Maritumis moribus mec expetitor, ita men frangit amant animum, nec nisi quia miser non neopessum nihil labis perditio permitties, ita pater apud villam detinuit, mostius sexuori continuos, nec licit interias me amicam viseris hoc miserum memoratu. Plautus's Anapest, then, are wild and wonderful. It is no wonder that Terence, in his determination to produce a more subdued, serious theater, abandoned the Anapest entirely, even as he produced sophisticated music with his iambotrochaics and occasionally dabbled with critics, bacchics, and iolics. The long career of Anapests, however, was hardly over. While the meager fragments of other Roman comic playwrights contain few, if any, Anapests, Anapests are by far the most common non-iambotrochaic meters in the fragments of Roman tragedy, from Ennius through Ovid. In addition to the anapestic laments mentioned above, these playwrights appear to have used the meter as well for less emotional moments, such as philosophical musing and battle reports. Seneca would build his tragedies on a combination of anapests, iambic trimeters, and a set of meters he inherited from Horace. Which leads us back to the pseudo-Senecan Octavia. The Anapests I cited above open the first of a set of 8 separate extended passages of Anapests in this play, performed by Octavia, her nurse, and the chorus, and they are the only passages outside of iambic trimeters in the play. The lowly Anapest has triumphed, becoming the way a dramatic playwright portrays excited voices that move beyond the realm of everyday speech. Thank you.